Prophecy, prophecy, prophecy. God rules in the affairs of men. Daniel 4 verse 17. On Sunday, January 2, 2022. Wisdom, Ogbe spoke forth a prophetic message, stating that the world should prepare for a strong drought coming. These were his words.
We come due to the new year, the year 2022. It's a joyful thing for one to see the beginning of the year. But what matters the most is to know the mind of God as regards what the year holds. Every minute of the day, God has a word. God is speaking. And it is good. We know the mind of God. When we know the mind of God, it helps us to prepare so that things doesn't take us on our way. When you know the mind of God, it helps you to seek the face of God more, resting in His mercies and in His grace. Some of the prophecies that I'll be giving as regards what the year holds for 2022, some of them may be pushed into the year 2023. Some, you'll see the light of it this year. Others, you'll see them being fully manifested in 2023. Just like some of the prophecies I gave as regard 2021. Some of them, there's an extension of them into the year 2022. So the prophecies I gave, some of them I gave for 2021, they will still suffix in this year 2022. So let's hear the mind of God as to what God is saying about the year 2022. Once again, I welcome you into the year. God, what brought you into this year will sustain you to the end part of the year, and for you to see another year and the years ahead coming through the grace of God in Jesus' mighty name. Now, what the future holds for 2022? Climatic change continue, but in a different direction. When I was giving the prophecy review for 2021, I made a statement during the review. I said I'm seeing what will happen in a different dimension. Towards that time, God has already started unfolding the things that will happen in 2022. And in 2022, climatic change continued, but in different direction. In 2021, many people cried because of the excess water on the surface of the earth. We saw a lot of floods, and people were crying due to the massive destruction and damages that were done. But this year, I've seen a strong drought. A strong drought. Water, which is common and also a free gift. I'm seeing a situation where water will become a precious pearl. It will become like gold that people would travel far to look for due to the dryness of the season. Water will be introduced into the trade system. It will be traded from one region to another. That means rainfall will be minimal this year. Rainfall will be less, to be minimal this year. And it will not be in all areas. Some areas will experience rainfall, full of rainfall. Other areas they may not experience. That is the drought that is coming this year that the world needs to prepare for. Scientific discovery as to control season, such as rainfall, would be proven wrong. It will be difficult for them to control the season because of the dryness of the season. And
So-called mega drought that is afflicting the American West is the worst in 1,200 years. That's according to a study published yesterday. It has dried up water supplies, threatened ranchers, and fueled wildfires. William Brangham explains more.
That's right, Judy. Last summer, two of the largest reservoirs in North America, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, reached their lowest ever recorded levels. Mega droughts have come and gone in the past, but this current one, now 22 years long, is being driven largely by human-caused climate change. According to the study, our warming atmosphere has made this drought much worse, 40% worse, and it's likely to continue. The new study was just published in the journal Nature Climate Change, and its lead author, Park Williams, joins me now. Park, great to have you back on the NewsHour. Could you just tell us a little bit more about the historic nature of this drought? I mean, 1,200 years that this is the worst that we've seen. How do you go about proving something like that?
Well, in the early 1900s, tree ring scientists in Arizona discovered that tree rings actually corresponds to drought in the southwestern United States. And in fact, after more work was done across most of western North America, trees are very sensitive to drought. And so the widths of their annual tree rings that grow within the tree trunks actually corresponds almost perfectly to the amount of water that the trees had available to them. From that research, the scientists realized that back in the medieval period, between about 800 and 1600 AD, there were repeated major drought events that they termed mega droughts. We used the tree ring records along with climate observations to try and tell how bad has the drought of the 2000s been relative to these mega droughts of the medieval period.
So how is it when you say that climate change is making this particular mega drought that we're in significantly worse, how do you go about proving that part of it?
Well, we do an analysis called a counterfactual analysis, where we basically study the world without climate change. And the way that we do that is we use climate models to tell us what the human-caused climate change has been over the last century, and then we recalculate what the climate records would have been without those human-caused climate trends. We can then calculate what the soil moisture balance would have been like in this counterfactual world where climate change never occurred.
So if you took out humanity's impact on the atmosphere, all the gases that we have put up there in the last several hundred years, would we still be experiencing out west a significantly dry period?
It would be a significantly dry period even without human-caused climate change because of just regular old bad luck. The tropical Pacific Ocean has been in a cold state for a lot of the last 22 years. That means kind of La Nina-like, and that usually means drought for the West. But those La Nina conditions have not been really extreme. And so we show that of the drought that was observed, about 40% of that drought's severity is explained by human-caused climate change.
One other thing that I'm struck by in your report is that even when the West gets significant snow or rain, that because of the warming atmosphere and the warmed earth, that water, each drop of rain, each snowflake is not as effective as it used to be. Can you explain that?
Sure. We're all familiar with this concept, actually. If we have houseplants, if you turn up the heater in your house and you don't give your plants more water, then they're gonna dry out faster. The same thing happens in the real world. Global warming is like turning on the heater in the atmosphere. The atmosphere's demand for moisture actually increases, and so plants and soil lose moisture more quickly in a warmer world than they would in a cooler world.
So for people who say, well, December and January in California, they got a ton of rain, they got a ton of snow. That ton of rain and ton of snow just didn't do as much to replenish the aquifers and the entire landscape.
Drought in southern Brazil has taken a toll on the country's soybean crop. Brazil is the world's largest soybean producer and was expected to harvest a record crop this year. Now, as a result of drought in the country's southern states, crop estimates have been slashed. The Brazilian government pegged the soybean crop at 125.5 million metric tons last week. That's a number that is 13% below what most traders and analysts had expected ahead of the growing season. We are no longer talking a record soybean crop in Brazil. U.S. futures on the CME Group have rallied more than 30% from their November low. Most would agree that production problems in South America and Brazil in particular are a major contributing factor. Brazil and the United States are the world's two biggest exporters of soybeans. Traders will be on the lookout for additional U.S. export business as a result of reduced South American crops.
Because of the drought situation that I'm seeing. For this little thing can kindle a great fire. Fire service should be alert to guide against massive destruction from wildfire.
Out that fire as the state continues to dry out. We're talking 33 days and counting. That's how long we've gone without rain this winter. And now the state's winter dry spell is raising new concern about our ongoing drought and the upcoming fire danger. As NBC Bay Area's Jody Hernandez tells us, CAL FIRE now considering ramping up its firefighting staff extra early this year.
You can bet CAL FIRE is paying close attention to this hot, dry weather. They could beef up staffing as early as April as they gear up for a potentially busy fire season across the state. Warm, windy weather sent firefighters scrambling this morning as a winter brush fire took off, forcing hundreds to evacuate in Orange County's Laguna Beach.
We no longer have a fire season. We have a fire year. It's February 10th. It's supposed to be the middle of winter.
We have a record of 33 days, 33 consecutive days, which is the longest we've ever gone without winter precipitation during December through February.
Scientist Andrew Schwartz at UC Berkeley's Central Sierra Snow Lab has watched the snowpack rapidly shrink this past month. He says the winter dry spell doesn't bode well for the drought or the state's fire outlook.
Once that snowpack disappears and our soil begins to dry out, that can really develop quickly, and we can see those severe and large fires again potentially this summer.
CAL FIRE says they're already in winter preparedness mode. They've got helicopters, bulldozers, and hand crews ready, and they may ramp up to peak staffing in April, a whole month earlier than last year.
We're monitoring fire behavior, fuel moisture, snowpack, and preparing to increase staffing commensurate with the risk. That may happen as early as April.
While many are enjoying the unusual stretch of winter sunshine, firefighters say folks need to create that defensible space around their homes now. Laguna Beach residents certainly got a scary winter wake-up call.
Please be cognizant that we are in a fire year. And if this is any sign of what's to come throughout the rest of the winter and spring, we're in for a long year.
Jody Hernandez, NBC Bay Area News.
With wildfires happening all year long now, fire prevention has become a top priority in the state.
Yeah, in Contra Costa County, they're proposing a line of fire breaks as defensible barrier to protect the most vulnerable communities. KPI X5's John Ramos has more on that.
The same conditions exist here as in places that have had massive wildfires. So Confire wants to build some safety buffers that may help slow a fire down. The danger is obvious to Bob Daines. He only has to look over the railing of his Rossmore home.
We look down there quite often and wonder what would happen when and if one of the fires will occur.
The senior living community of Rossmore is particularly vulnerable, nestled beneath mountains on three sides.
The areas to our south, though, is the Las Trampas Wilderness, which has a lot of vegetation, which has become a threat, especially now that California has entered into this new mega fire time.
It's along the Las Trampas Ridge that Confire, East Bay Regional Parks, and the Moraga-Orinda Fire District want to extend a 13-mile stretch of what's called shaded fuel breaks. The trees would remain, but all the lower debris and vegetation would be removed to a height of 6 feet, creating a defensible space up to 100 feet wide.
So we want to eliminate all those lower fuels that we call ladder fuels to eliminate the crowning fires. It's a lot easier to control those small fires that are 2 or 3 foot running across the ground to extinguish or put in anchor points than it is those fires when they're 30, 40 feet high.
Confire is asking the state for $5 million to establish the breaks that would surround the Rossmore community, slowing down any fires coming in or out, while also providing protection for nearby Moraga, Lafayette, and Walnut Creek.
So it really gives us that good buffer that if something is coming over the Los Trompas Ridge, it's going to provide us plenty of space to slow it down and put the fire out.
The state has put a high priority on creating fuel breaks, increasing the number of projects from 35 this year to more than 500 in the next 5 years. It could avert another disaster and, at the very least, give Bob Daines a good night's sleep.
We do think about it all the time.
In Rossmore, John Ramos, KPIX 5.
Two major wildfires in California within the past month, prompting some firefighters to call this a year-round fire season. Our Len Ramirez has a story from Los Gatos Hills.
Well, normally we would be in what firefighters consider the off-season, when there's more rain and the temperatures are lower and the risk of fires goes down to practically nothing. But that's not the case anymore, as we've seen with recent fires in northern and now southern California. Fires raging in the California hills with 20-foot flames. These look like images from the height of the summer and fall fire seasons, but these shots were taken just this morning in Southern California and just last month on the Big Sur coast.
Really, there is no end of fire season. Fire season's year-round in California.
CAL FIRE Battalion Chief John Hagee says the unusually dry, warm weather we're experiencing this winter comes close to matching the conditions normally seen later in the year.
And what that's resulting in is high fire danger. So we're seeing those ignitions actually getting established and having fires where typically we don't see that at this time of year.
Santa Clara County Fire Battalion Chief Mike Matheson was up at the Los Gatos Hills today to keep readiness high given the weather.
So I'm maintaining a weather station up on Los Gatos, Blackberry Hill.
He was just back from fighting the Colorado fire in Big Sur when this fire broke out near Lexington Reservoir over the weekend. Fortunately, a strong response, including helicopter water drops, kept it from spreading.
We're able to stop it before it became catastrophic.
And they're now urging neighbors, especially those in mountainous areas, to use caution with cigarettes, barbecues, and other sources of ignition.
And don't let your guard down regardless of what time of year it is. If it's warm and it's dry and it's windy, chances are if you're living in California, you have a fire threat.
In Los Gatos, Len Ramirez, KPIX 5.
After a dry January, February is starting much the same, and the fire danger is growing, with many parts of California seeing fuel moisture levels looking more like the summer. KPIX 5's Andrea Nakano is in Santa Rosa with how agencies hope to prevent a devastating winter fire.
Fire season hasn't started here yet, but with the dry conditions we're seeing right now, North Bay could see the earliest start to fire season yet. Some were out enjoying a beautiful mild night in downtown Santa Rosa. It's perfect weather for heading outdoors, but the lack of rain has many concerns.
Walk outside the other day and you can smell smoke and you just, a little bit of wind and you just start getting worried.
The Santa Rosa Fire Department has been keeping a close eye on the dry conditions.
Without the rain, they're not soaking up that moisture. So with the lack of rain and the dry conditions, those heavier fuels are reaching kind of record-breaking fuel moisture levels for this time of year.
The department has already started to reach out to the community, trying to get the word out about fire safety, especially with the threat of a blaze so early on in the year.
Now, granted, we're not expecting any significant large-scale fires, but we do have the potential for some sort of fire activity, especially with how dry the conditions are and with some of the breezy conditions that we're set to experience.
The hope is rain will come in March and April to push back the official start of fire season to its typical time in early June. But without another significant storm, 2022 could set a record for the earliest fire season ever, beating last year's start in early May.
It's kind of like last year where we had a big storm in like December and November and then nothing.
Division Chief Paul Lowenthal says after consecutive years of devastating and deadly fires, last year wasn't as severe. He credits the relationship with the community to keep this area safe. In Santa Rosa, Andrea Nakano, KPIX 5.
Of nearly back-to-back storms was nice, but it just wasn't enough. Now, after weeks without rain, 32 days to be exact, our water woes are growing. Climate watchers say our situation is again teetering on being dire. NBC Bay Area's Kaplanman explains the concern now, fire season.
Yeah, the latest warning comes from the people here at Valley Water, who tell us despite a solid December full of rain, we're facing yet again drought conditions and an early fire season unless we get more rain soon. The good news? December rain pumped a lot of water into our reservoirs and turned the hills we see every day green, along with a big bump for our snowpack. But
we've had backsliding in the sense of a horrible January, one of the worst Januaries on record. February to date, no rain.
And Valley Water says the optimism we felt just a month ago is waning as our plants and hills once again dry out.
But it actually wasn't that much net precipitation to us because the ground was so dry. We didn't get as much runoff as we wanted.
Which means even though it's February, climate watchers are already starting to worry about fire risk.
It's the fuel moisture that we really worry about because the plants are really moist. They don't burn so easily. And so the drier they are, the easier they ignite and the hotter the fires can be and more intense.
So, bottom line,
if we don't get more rain.
I'm seeing a situation where rivers and streams would get dried up. And there would be a short cycle of water flowing from one region to another. Rivers that flow, that circulate water from one region to another. Because of dryness, there will be a shortage of water that I'm seeing in this year 2022. This coming situation would affect agriculture. It will affect agriculture, most especially farmers, because they need water to cultivate their crops. This would bring about increase in price of food stuff and shortage of food, which would lead to famine and hunger. So because there will be dryness because of the droughts, no water, no rainfall, streams is going to dry up. It's going to affect agriculture greatly. That because farmer needs water to cultivate their crops, but because there will be shortage of water, their crop will not be able to yield more results, and this will bring about increase in price rates, famine, and hunger.
Of a village that was totally submerged underwater when a large reservoir was created nearly 70 years ago. I have never seen that, says Carlos Perdigao, 76, as he gazes at the ruined stone houses of Villar which were swallowed up by the Zizera River when a dam was opened in 1954. Villar stands on the banks of the river, surrounded by cracked yellow earth, another sign of the ongoing dry spell during what is normally a rainy winter season, with the drought also hitting neighboring Spain. Weather services in both countries say it was the second driest January on record since the year 2000. The current drought is extraordinary because of its intensity, scale and length, says climate scientist Ricardo Dias of Portugal's meteorology agency IPMA. Of Portugal's 55 dams, 24 are only holding half of their water capacity, and 5 are below 20%, according to the European Union's Copernicus Earth Observation Service. The Algarve, Portugal's southernmost province, and one of Europe's top tourism destinations, is one of those most affected by the drought. Meanwhile, Spain only got a quarter of the precipitation it normally gets in January, said the EMET Weather Service. The dry spell, which began at the end of 2021, is ruining crops, leaving farmers struggling to feed livestock and hampering hydroelectricity production. It's a disaster. Earlier this month, Portugal ordered 5 of its hydropower dams to suspend water use for electricity production in order to prioritize human consumption. Nearly 30% of Portugal's electricity comes from hydropower dams. And in Spain, Agriculture Minister Luis Planas on Tuesday said the government was concerned about the drought and would adopt the necessary measures depending on how the situation evolves. Spain's water reserves are currently at less than 45% of their capacity, officials say, with the southern Andalusia region and Catalonia in the northeast worst hit. Farmers in both countries are worried. Look. The grass isn't growing to feed the animals, says Antonio Estevao, a cheese producer who owns a herd of around 30 goats in Portela de Fogo Machio, a village in central Portugal near the town of Pampilhosa de Serra. If it doesn't rain in the coming days, it's going to be very complicated, he sighs, gazing at his drought-stressed pastures. The lack of rain is also jeopardizing the town's efforts to draw tourists inland with a floating pool structure set up for bathers in the Zizera River. But the pool's plastic lining lies slumped on the ground, with the drought forcing the river to recede. For us, it's a disaster, says the town's mayor, Enrique Fernandez Marquez. The same area was badly hit by a wave of wildfires that raged through parched farmlands and forests in 2017, claiming over 100 lives. No end in sight. More frequent and intense droughts are expected to put enormous strain on climate-vulnerable regions as temperatures rise, and will likely heighten the risk of related natural disasters such as wildfires, scientists say. While the alternation between dry and wet years is normal in southern Europe, we have observed a decline in the percentage of rainy years lately, said Felipe Duarte Santos, an environment specialist at Lisbon University. These droughts are one of the most serious consequences of climate change, he added. Until greenhouse gas emissions are drastically reduced, the problem will continue. The situation is not likely to improve in the coming weeks as forecast.
An abandoned village reappears. It was submerged in 1992 when Acevedo in Spain's northwestern Galicia region was flooded to create a reservoir. But a major drought has revealed the coast village beneath.
The feeling is nostalgic as they see the home of a family member, their own, or of someone they know re-emerge. In younger people or those who are not from here, it triggers curiosity.
The ruins make for great viewing. Visitors walk down muddy paths to see partially collapsed roofs, bricks, and wooden debris that once formed homes.
It's impressive to see it like this. It is rare to be able to enjoy this scene, and this is why we came, to take pictures and to at least have the picture of what this was like.
My feeling is that's what will happen over the years to drought and all that with climate change.
For months now, Spain has suffered from low rainfall, and data from the Environment Ministry shows reservoirs are well below capacity. For tourists, a nostalgic trip around a coast village is also a reminder the region is facing a tough reality.
In central Portugal, a sustained drought has revealed the ruins of a village that was totally submerged underwater when a large reservoir was created nearly 70 years ago. I have never seen that, says Carlos Perdigao, 76, as he gazes at the ruined stone houses of Villar which were swallowed up by the Zizera River when a dam was opened in 1954. Villar stands on the banks of the river, surrounded by cracked yellow earth, another sign of the ongoing dry spell during what is normally a rainy winter season, with the drought also hitting neighboring Spain. Weather services in both countries say it was the second driest January on record since the year 2000. The current drought is extraordinary because of its intensity, scale and length, says climate scientist Ricardo Dias of Portugal's meteorology agency IPMA. Of Portugal's 55 dams, 24 are only holding half of their water capacity, and 5 are below 20%, according to the European Union's Copernicus Earth Observation Service. The Algarve, Portugal's southernmost province, and one of Europe's top tourism destinations, is one of those most affected by the drought. Meanwhile, Spain only got a quarter of the precipitation it normally gets in January, said the EMET Weather Service. The dry spell, which began at the end of 2021, is ruining crops, leaving farmers struggling to feed livestock and hampering hydroelectricity production. It's a disaster. Earlier this month, Portugal ordered 5 of its hydropower dams to suspend water use for electricity production in order to prioritize human consumption. Nearly 30% of Portugal's electricity comes from hydropower dams. And in Spain, Agriculture Minister Luis Planas on Tuesday said the government was concerned about the drought and would adopt the necessary measures depending on how the situation evolves. Spain's water reserves are currently at less than 45% of their capacity, officials say, with the southern Andalusia region and Catalonia in the northeast worst hit. Farmers in both countries are worried. Look. The grass isn't growing to feed the animals, says Antonio Estevao, a cheese producer who owns a herd of around 30 goats in Portela de Fogo Machio, a village in central Portugal near the town of Pampilhosa de Serra. If it doesn't rain in the coming days, it's going to be very complicated, he sighs, gazing at his drought-stressed pastures. The lack of rain is also jeopardizing the town's efforts to draw tourists inland with a floating pool structure set up for bathers in the Zizera River. But the pool's plastic lining lies slumped on the ground, with the drought forcing the river to recede. For us, it's a disaster, says the town's mayor, Enrique Fernandez Marquez. The same area was badly hit by a wave of wildfires that raged through parched farmlands and forests in 2017, claiming over 100 lives. No end in sight. More frequent and intense droughts are expected to put enormous strain on climate-vulnerable regions as temperatures rise, and will likely heighten the risk of related natural disasters such as wildfires, scientists say. While the alternation between dry and wet years is normal in southern Europe, we have observed a decline in the percentage of rainy years lately, said Felipe Duarte Santos, an environment specialist at Lisbon University. These droughts are one of the most serious consequences of climate change, he added. Until greenhouse gas emissions are drastically reduced, the problem will continue. The situation is not likely to improve in the coming weeks as forecast.
Zoologists, please take care of the animals. I'm seeing an unnecessary dying of animals. A state where you see animals just dying unnecessarily without knowing the major cause of the death. I'm seeing that situation. So zoologists, some advice for them to take care of the animals, to prevent unnecessary dying of animals.
Rainy seasons have failed in the lowland regions of eastern Ethiopia. The UN says more than 4 million people are facing critical water shortages. In recent months, the livestock they depend on to survive have been dying in their tens of thousands. Herding livestock to survive, they have to walk further every month to find water. The pools where the animals drink are a fraction of their usual size. Getting out what's left of the water isn't easy, but it keeps thirsty camels alive. The UN's mobile clinics are helping some, but it says it needs about $30 million to reach all the people who are in need.
Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, deceased livestock, malnourished children, drought-related deaths, and people searching for aid has sadly become the norm for more than 3 million people in Somalia, leading to a critical food shortage and loss of income-generated activities. Omar Mahmoud, the Somalia senior analyst at the International Crisis Group, will be joining me from Nairobi for his assessment on the scale of the crisis. And